And welcome everybody. Today we are at the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake and we will be interviewing Grand Chief Joe Norton on the issue of the tobacco trade. And you're joining me today, Regan Jacobs. I'm the journalist on hand, and we're going to go right into the interview. So now, Joe, can you tell me, in a recent interview, an article that came out with the Montreal Gazette, you had stated that Kahnawake would license the tobacco trade by the end of the summer. Can you tell me how this will be accomplished?
Well, first and foremost, the whole reasoning and rationale behind sort of putting a timeline on it was to light a fire under everybody. This thing had been dragging along for quite a number of years now. Although I just was elected on the 21st of June, I had been following very closely what was happening. And like others, I was quite frustrated because of the fact that the government of Canada had imposed its own bill regarding, Bill C-10, regarding the Tobacco Industry, Tobacco Act, and it was geared specifically towards Native people and not necessarily other people of ethnic origin, you know. Mm-hmm. We don't need to get into that, but I think everybody would understand what I mean by that. And for years, it's been a very controversial issue, and I wanted something to get started as quickly as possible. And what other way than causing controversy, if you will. Now, the reality of it is that it's possible to have something in place very quickly if all the parties, MCK, as well as the tobacco industry, the people in Kahnawake, who have really the ones who have nurtured the business, are prepared to do something and do it quickly. Even though there is a process in place called the CDMP process, which we are supposed to use in order to recognize and implement legislation in the community, I looked at this situation as an emergency situation in light of the fact that Canada was already prepared to impose, to crack down and do all the things that it needed to and wanted to do in attempting to quash the industry and our livelihood. It's not just Kahnawake, mind you, it's any and every indigenous community, territory in Canada, the United States also, that's involved in the tobacco industry. Be it growers, be it manufacturers, be it people moving product, finished product back and forth. So it is very important to get a jump on everything and do the best as possible. So it wasn't just simply an imposed kind of thing on behalf of the MCK. It was really my initiative, okay, taking a personal initiative to push everybody, because both the MCK table as well as the people in the industry themselves seemed to be very uncertain as to what the next steps were, although they had tried to put in place certain, you know, what do we do now kind of thing. So what do we do now is act quickly.
It did seem like it came as a surprise to a good number of people, including some of the council members here at the Mohawk Council. Yes. Why was that?
I am not certain. You'd have to ask them directly to find out what their situation was.
Were they clued in, or?
We did have this. There was some discussions on there, but as I mentioned, prior to my being elected, it was there. The work had been done. There had been a certain amount of cooperation between the parties, as well as information being given to the community. A point in time when there was, you know, we finally have reached a milestone in terms of the tobacco industry in the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake. Attempts have been made previous to this, almost 20 years ago. I remember being involved in a similar process which ended in failure, you know, and total chaos and people accusing each other of everything happening, you know. And I didn't want to see the same thing happen. So I felt that in my capacity as a newly elected voice, if you will, an old one, mind you, from previous years, coming in now and saying, let's get this done. So I take a bit of a political risk, in doing something like that, maybe alienating the table. I'm being very open, honest about it, where I sit, as well as alienating some of the people in the industry itself. But others have come up to me and said, it's a good move, it is the right move. We need to do that. We need somebody to really push everybody along. Because it's always like, what do we do after this kind of thing,
Well, given your experience in history with this particular issue in Kahnawake, what will be different this time around, if anything?
Because there's a main purpose behind this, which I've talked to many people about. This is sort of a long answer to a very short question. The long answer is going back in time, historically, tobacco has always been our product. Ours meaning indigenous people across Turtle Island. I'm saying Turtle Island because at one time there was no North America. There was just Turtle Island for our people, and everybody called it that, And so for us, tobacco was one of our mainstays. It was a product that we used for spiritual purposes and for just enjoyment. Otherwise, it was also used for commercial trade. It's definitely been recorded that it was used in bartering and all kinds of different activities within trade and commerce between the nations. When the European arrived, they discovered, as far as they're concerned, that there was this product, and they over time took control of it, made it their product, created a market for themselves, created an industry for themselves, first and foremost in Europe, then afterwards within North America, and took over completely, legislated it into existence, licensed it, all for themselves, and cut us completely out of the picture. So it's only been since 1980, 81 when we decided to enter the market again. Mind you, it wasn't the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake, it was individuals in the community. That's the way things always start, individual in the community. And they pushed, and there was some concern over it at the time, why are we doing this? Why are we selling a product to someone else? And the product, it's almost like we didn't really recognize that it was ours, that it was now somebody else's. And we shouldn't be doing this because we're selling it, we're giving away our freedom, taxation kind of rights. And that became an issue, but gradually over time it became accepted. And the product, we weren't producing it, we were using somebody else's product. Crossing it from one side of the American border to the Canadian side, and they called it smuggling. We never called it smuggling, we said it's our right. So we turned our original product, now owned by somebody else supposedly, and we turned it back to what we believed was our right. So we really entered the industry again, re-entered it back in 1980, 81, and really began to flourish. And as time went on, of course, there was all kinds of problems. There was a raid here in Kahnawake, 1988, which created quite a furor and quite a first time ever the highways were closed, the bridge was closed, and all that. And since then, the industry has gone back and forth until our people have said, we don't want to be just moving somebody else's product. We want to produce our own product, and that's what we did. In the community.
Number of manufacturers.
Yes, manufacturers started, and we even went to the actual growers and began to procure the product too. Six Nations was a major force in all of this. Can't forget that. They started up their GRE, their major Grand River Enterprises company, and grew and are now competing worldwide with the major companies that are out there, such as Imperial Tobacco, etc. But on the smaller scale, the communities themselves, Akwesasne, Kahnawake, and other areas began to manufacture and produce. And it stimulated quite a growth and quite an economic situation for us. And all the while, even though we legitimized it and we said it's ours, but we never put anything really together. We attempted to and it didn't work. We never really created the kind of policies and laws and rules and regulations that we would abide by. in order to make the industry more solid and to be able to face anything that comes down the road. So as we move on in time now, we get to this stage. I'm moving very quickly on this. A lot has happened in between that one can forget about. You know?
I don't want to cut you off. I have questions, but just keep going.
Anyway, we get to this stage now where it is Canada passes its legislation. It's in existence. It's already had its effects. So we now find ourselves in a circumstance where we have to do something. We put in place this law, and the purpose is to protect our people and to make sure we show Canada and anyone else that we're legitimate. The government and the government of Kahnawake and the industry itself are one and the same. At the same time, there's a broader picture too. Because of that, I'll call it that ancient historical theft of our product, it is now time for us to challenge the status quo and say that it's illegal what you have done. Mm-hmm. Right from the beginning, it's illegal for you to have imposed all the way through history, all your laws and all your thinking, all your philosophy, all your commercialization of our product and cut us completely out of it. Till now you've come up with a law, an anti-tobacco law, mm-hmm. which serves your purposes, which serves your industry, which serves your people, not us. And you've grabbed us and you've made us part of it, and you've criminalized us, you've criminalized the industry for us. So it's time for us to push back and say, you're illegal. We are legitimate. We are legitimate and we have the right to do what we're doing now, and we're going to continue to pursue this. So there has to be a much broader challenge, be it a constitutional challenge, be it whatever it is, force the government back to the table and you know, create this situation where there's equality. We walk and we sit there, you know, at the same level. Never mind this, we're down here and they're up there. As a matter of fact, we're up here and we pull them up to our level to understand, you know, what this is all about. It's one thing for me to say that, but it's another thing for the community to understand. And I think we do, but it's got to be put in sort of a real graphic way now to make it clear. It's not just to defend the rights of Kahnawake, it's a much higher way of exercising that right and making it clear to Canada that they're illegal, not us. And we can't put ourselves in a category where we're smugglers and all that sort of thing.
It seems that there is a lot of misconception, if you will, from even the surrounding communities, but often when stories hit mainstream media that come out of Kahnawake or Akwesasne, Six Nations, in regards to the tobacco trade, taxes, land issues, you know, that old saying always comes up, well, just get over it, you know, just move on. It almost seems like the general Canadian person, if you will, doesn't seem to understand the history that of the Haudenosaunee, of the Iroquois, even if, you know, if you're looking at First Nations, Indigenous people in general. How do you know, in your opinion, combat that type of mentality? Because you know you're dealing with it at the governmental level also, the Canadian governmental level. Well,
you get tired of combating it according to their rules. I mean, for too long, and mind you, there's many historic and precedent-setting cases that have happened in court that have been in our favor. But on an overall basis, the whole Canadian system, from the laws, the rules, the regulations, the policies that transits itself through business in all different areas, and especially in the education system, there's really no major attempts that have been put in place. Mind you, there are things that are going on now that are very favorable, but in order to educate the Canadian society from the youngest age when they enter the school system, it's all geared towards what they call the Canadian historical educational system, which doesn't include all of the things that you just talked about. Mm-hmm. It completely dismisses and totally ignores all that has happened historically to us and the relationship between Canada and the Indigenous people of Canada. recent events such as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report really bear that out, because people have said, I didn't realize that happened in Canada. Now, either they're really ignorant of that and never heard about it and didn't have a clue, or they're lying, or they're ashamed because it happens right on their doorstep, right in their own backyards. This is not something that happened in Europe or anywhere else, like the Holocaust of the Jewish. And I'm not downplaying that. That's real. That's true. That happened. Everybody goes, oh my God, But what about here? Now all of a sudden, oh my God, is happening here. So that's part of the reason you have this total sort of ignorant kind of sphere around Canadians, because they don't realize. They don't realize that we are not part of the Canadian fabric. We are not subjects of the Crown. We are not subjects of Canada. We are a separate, different part of the society that exists here. Decolonization, there's colonizers, then there's us. In other countries all over the world, it's happened where decolonization has taken place and the colonizers leave, and then they leave a mess. Here, the colonizers have stayed and they continue to make a mess, That's the way I view it. So it's up to us now, not necessarily to be dependent on what Canada kind of laws they have in place or how they try to make life better. It's up to us to develop our own system in our own way of existing, and it's up to us to educate them too. We have a dual responsibility, unfortunately, but that's the fact of life. That's the way we are.
Given the fact that the tobacco industry, has been quite controversial, in the sense that there have been other links from other sectors of business, if you will, that are considered illegal, and that some individuals in our own community have gone, outside of just dealing in tobacco. How can the community feel assured that this type of industry will be regulated properly and that those issues will be dealt with in a legal sense, in a policing sense, in a jurisdictional sense, so that we aren't almost demonizing ourselves to the point where we give the reason to the outside forces, our government, to say, well, look what they're doing. They're not just trading tobacco. They're not just manufacturing. There's other issues there.
Well, very upfront and honest about it. You're correct in saying that there are others who have entered the industry here in Kahnawake and have attempted to take full advantage of it, and those are criminal elements, no question about it. The stories are here, the stories are prevalent amongst the industry itself. They know and they understand and they realize that's happened. People have either willingly, opened the door and brought them in, or unwittingly in some instances have gotten caught up in that. And let's not kid ourselves. I mean, the outside authorities know full well about this, all right? So we have to then cleanse, if you will, the industry. And that's why these regulations have been put in place. That's the reason why it's self-regulated in a sense, because the main movers came right from the people themselves. As the industry started back in the 80s, early 80s, it was the people themselves that pushed it here. So now the people have to push it themselves, and they're the ones who started the idea we have to regulate this. But we need the cooperation and the assistance of the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake. And yes, the law is in place, and those that break it will be subject to prosecution.
That was one of my questions, is that, how will the tobacco trade be governed? How will it be enforced?
Well, you have to have some sort of inspection process. You have to have people who will be part of the industry to make sure that the rules and regulations are being followed, that there is compliance. If you're going to be serious about wanting to put something in place that's going to create, some sort of governance of the industry, then you have to be seriously involved and not just say, yeah, it's good, it's going to protect me, but I'm going to do what I want anyway. It's not going to happen. And people are going to find out that it's not going to happen.
Because there have always been those issues with the price parity,
definitely.
Fair marketable,
Yeah.
pricing, and also issues of the product itself and quality assurance. So, I mean, and they're contentious issues.
All of those things have to be met, because if we want to show that we are responsible, and we mean business, and we want to make this clearly a very legitimate business on our part, to show not only Canada, not only North America, but the world that we are a player in the industry, then that's what we have to do. We have to do that. And if we can't do that, we don't want to do that, then we have no business being in the industry.
I understand that the Mohawk Council in the past, but also currently, has tried to reach out to the different traditional bodies in the community. Where is that at, and what type of response is the Mohawk Council looking for?
That's one of the issues when I retired from politics in 2004 as the Grand Chief. That's one of the issues that I found that I was unable to achieve. Coming back this time, that's one of the priorities that I have. And gradually, over the course of the next 3 years, gradually and hopefully increasing swiftly over time, discussions will begin. Because there's so many major issues that are out there now that need to be attended to, that need to be, that need the involvement of all sectors of the community, I'll put it that way. Now, how that comes about is going to be a very enormous task in terms of what's the relationship. How official or unofficial can it be? How serious can it be? And in what manner, shape, or form can this take place? Case in point, we've been, I say we, although I wasn't on the council, but I did see the reminder from the Longhouse in Kahnawake several months back, whatever it was, pointing out that there are 8 points of jurisdiction that are exclusive to the Longhouse, which has extended from years ago when the Haudenosaunee itself, the Grand Council, made that declaration way back in time. 2 key issues. One is membership and lands. Now, if the Longhouse is responsible, and this is a challenge that I'm throwing out, if the Longhouse is responsible for lands, if they're responsible for membership, then where are they now? And if they're going to remain silent, or if they're going to remain passive, that's the only word I can use, not a negative thing, but if they're going to be passive, then we as the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake and the community itself that are pushing, to make headway with the membership issue, and in lands, and lands is not just Kahnawake proper, it's also the scenery, and any other traditional Mohawk Nation territory. And I'll use that name, Mohawk Nation territory, because this is what it's about. It's not just about Kahnawake. If that's what this is all about, then they have to step forth and be a part of something. And I hope it's not to put us down, and say that you're wrong, you're not the right party, and it's only us. And if it is you, then please step forward and help out. Help out, not the council. Help the community. Help the Mohawk Nation.
Would you consider their recent move passive, like to occupy the land on Highway 3?
No, that is good. I like that. That's very good. I mean,
what would you expect from them in terms of dealing with membership or lands?
well, I have an idea that I'm laying out right now. I haven't even talked to the council about this. It's not a hidden agenda or anything. I'm being very open about it. Is number one with lands. It's the first of all, the title of the land. If we follow a traditional thinking, the title of the land is in the woman. Women hold title to the land. It is their authority, their responsibility to care for the land. Okay. So we have a system right now that even traditional people will tell you they follow, and that is registering of their properties with Indian Affairs under the Indian Act, so that they can receive a certificate of possession and title that says this is what you're, but it's from a foreign government. I'll put the terms that they use, it's from a foreign government.
Right.
So failure to have any other method in place, that's what we go to. Everybody does that, or I assume everybody does that. Maybe there are examples in the community where it hasn't been done, and good for them. But somewhere along the way, they may hit a wall in terms of, transfer sales and all that kind of thing. So in order for us to be really in possession of the land, then if we go the traditional route, then we look at women as being the title holders. So it should be the women who pass on, who do all the registration and transfer of lands. It could be done through a clan system representing the community, and at all registrations now you receive some sort of recognition of the land that you hold, through a survey or taking what exists right now and just transferring it over. I'm saying just. It's not a simple matter, but at the very least you start on the ground exercising that sort of thing, and our people get used to that. There's going to be resistance, just like there is in all kinds of other fashions, but truly, if that's what you feel, if you're sitting in the traditional chair, the longhouse chair, and saying the title is in the women, the Mohawk Council and the Indian Act has nothing to do with that, then do something about it. Be very clear this is your intention. Start rallying, and we'll work with you. I will work with them. I have no problem with that.
Well, there seems to have been a bit of a history of Mohawk Council and the traditional bodies not being able to work together. And the 8 points of jurisdiction that you just mentioned have been a contentious one.
They have been.
Them not, Mohawk Council not kind of wanting to come to the table on that issue. And I wonder what is if there's an underlying...
That's not so. The attempts have been made by the Mohawk Council, I know. Now, of course, there's always this, whether it was a very valid attempt or whether it was just saying, I'm doing my duty kind of thing, okay?
Right.
On the other hand, I think the two parties for too long have kind of sat back and said, well, what's your reasoning for doing? Is there something else behind this? And there needs to be a lowering of the guard, so to speak, to be able to find some sort of neutral place to have these discussions without any real commitments being made in the beginning. But if you want to discuss the 8 points of jurisdiction, fine, let's discuss them. Let's get into detail, let's get into the fine, let's structure something, traditional and non-traditional, that begins to pull that together and say, all right, how do we do this? How do we accomplish this? Because it's for the betterment of the whole community. It's not just for the betterment of the longhouse, because not everybody's longhouse in the community. And we've got a much bigger enemy sitting out there right now that's doing all this activity, preparing itself, to come down hard on us and to prevent us from making this move. And I want to make it clear, because I like to be graphic about things, and I've done this just recently. You have two situations. One is you have what's known as the Kahnawake Indian Reserve number 14 under the Indian Act, under the Government of Canada. Then you have over here, you have the Kahnawake Mohawk territory under the Mohawk Nation, traditional type of setting. So right now we're sort of in between, back and forth. So how do we get rid of Kahnawake Indian Reserve number 14 and all that it has that prevents us, from progressing, moving forward, restricts us? Matter of fact, it takes us back in time in history.
Not just politics.
No, that's everything.
Yeah.
And some of our people have become very accustomed to that kind of, the Indian Act protects us, it saves us, it does this, it does that. So if we get rid of that, we go over here, we're going to lose everything. I don't believe that. I have no doubt that if we make that move, it's the right kind of move to make. It's the most important move to make. That's the way I view it. Because it's come very clear, and to take a very complicated situation and simplify it, that's what it really is about. And people begin at that level, we begin to look at it from that point of view, then it becomes that much much more clear to us what we need to do. And we need to know that we need to leave something futuristic all the time for the next generation to be able to grasp onto. We want to get rid of Kahnawake number 14, and we want Kahnawake Mohawk traditional territory to take effect. It's not just about traditional government. It's about everything that's attached to that. That's most important. The identity of your land, the identity of your people, the right to an education, the right to an economy, and your own governance, the own type of government you want. 5 different key areas that you need to be able to be in control of. And do we have that right now? No. We're missing pieces out of that. And that's all stuck in that one category, Kahnawake Reserve number 14. You need to get rid of that. Very clear.
Would you say that, given your statement just now, and would you say that your council is on board or shares the same vision as you do? And how important is it that they do?
It's totally important to have everyone on side. And it's very clear that not everybody embraces it at this point, but I would expect, but the main thing is it's the council is important, but it's the community itself that needs to embrace that and say, yes, that's what we want to do. Yes, that's what we're striving for. Then pushes the council to say, this is our mandate now. This is our marching orders. This is our directive. And that goes back all the way to when the famous 1979 statement was made at one of the big, huge Knights of Columbus meetings. That was when peacekeepers were created after David Cross was murdered by the SQ. One of the elders in the community stood up and said, we need to go back to traditional government. And the response was yes. So that kicked off a whole series of things. Mind you, it sputtered and stumbled along the way, but it's never been lost. And we keep reminding ourselves, and we keep being reminded by community members, traditional and non-traditional, don't forget this is what you were told. And you got to follow that. And it's true, we have to. That's one of the reasons why I made a comeback, because I said, it seems like we're not going in that direction. So the long story short to the question you asked about the council, no, honestly, not everybody's on board. They have a sense, we all have a sense that there's a common goal here. It's a question of how do we get there. I'm bringing an old, fresh way of doing this and trying to generate the kind of momentum that will spark, the unity at the table as well as the unity in the community, and then take us through the long haul.
You mentioned a lot of things in the community that have occurred, not nice things, that like David Cross, that sort of put this community in a position to move and move swiftly.
Yes.
Membership. Things like policing, jurisdiction, the Oka crisis. It's amazing to see and hear what this community has gone through in order to maintain its jurisdiction, maintain its lands, to push back to the Canadian government, the Quebec government. When you look at the tobacco trade, do you feel that this is just another instance in which Kahnawake is being pushed, is being pressured, the same way that it has in the past, in correlation, to some of these larger issues that we faced as a community?
Yes, and I'm happy to say, and proud to say, that I was all a part of that. Which brings us to this day, to this time period, in which all of that experience, all the hard work that was done back then, mind you, not just by myself alone, but by thousands of people in the community, and even outside of us, those that supported us through all of that. That gives me a bit of an edge to be able to talk the way I talk, because I'm not talking from, just ideas that are popping around in my head. It's all happened. I've seen it all. I've seen the growth. I've seen the elevation continuously of where we're going. And now we need to go even higher. We have to challenge ourselves first and foremost that we can do that. If we say that, it's like very difficult, whatever, yeah, it's difficult, but at the same time, not afraid of it, that's where we need to go, then that's what we will do. That's what this community is about. It knows instinctively, in a sense, in a way, what it needs to do. It needs some guidance and somebody to be out there to be able to explain the how-to part. That always seems to be the way we go, and it's quite lifting to be a part of that. It really is. To know that something exciting, challenging is going to. I don't look at what's coming down the road as being, oh my God, it's dangerous and all that. It has all those elements mixed into it, but it's also exciting to be able to push back. Bang! Let them hit the wall. Never mind us constantly hitting the wall. Let them hit the wall and let us stand up there and say, no sir. The old cry from way back when, not another inch of land will be taken from us. That's true. Now we're saying it's going the other way. We're going to take back not only scenery, but we're talking about traditional Mohawk Nation territory, Montreal, all over the South Shore, all down there. That's part of our land. And evidence is starting to creep up here and there now, showing that there are ancient burial grounds and things that are happened 400, 500 years ago. That shows that our territory, recent court decisions, one in particular out in British Columbia, the Kilchwatan decision, Supreme Court of Canada, unanimous decision, that Native people now have Aboriginal title to their land. It's no longer Crown land. And it doesn't include just their reservation, it includes all the traditional territory where they've traveled continuously and still travel to this day. We still go to Montreal continuously. We still work there, we go to school there, we have our people there, we have burial grounds there. So it's a proven fact that is part of our territory. And in any instance in which I've been in Montreal, like recently at the AFN Assembly, as they called it, the host community, Kahnawake, I had to make a presentation to the Assembly. And welcome everybody to Mohawk territory, welcome to Montreal, the greatest and most successful Kahnawake suburb is what I called it. Montreal's a suburb of Kahnawake, and not the other way around. A humorous but true fact for us. And that's the way we need to behave. That's the way we need to act.
Getting back to the tobacco trade, because we're all over, and that's fine, because it seems like one thing leads into another.
It does,
it's all
definitely.
tied in together. In the past, though, there's been a lot of criticism about the Mohawk Council regulating the tobacco trade, about the Mohawk Council getting into business, or even guiding the process. But since it seems that it was the industry this time that came forward and said, this is what we want, what if not everybody is on board? How will that be handled?
Well, if we're serious about what we're doing, because we're all involved, take off the hats. If this is a communal type of move, if we're serious about it, then we will enforce it the way it is written. That's the easiest way to answer it. Those that don't want to comply will be subject to the law of Kahnawake.
What do you feel is Kahnawake's biggest obstacle with the tobacco trade and dealing with the trade? What's our biggest obstacle?
Ourselves. Simply for us to, because it was unregulated before, and as I mentioned, there was attempts by myself and others to help the industry, because the industry came to us years ago and asked, let's put something together. And we got criticized for it. And it didn't go anywhere. So this is the second attempt now, 20 some odd years later, to do the same thing. And it comes from the industry again, and requesting assistance from the MCK, support in some fashion for it, but it has to be a community-led industry. So the kind of mistrust, distrust that has gone back and forth between the MCK as well as the industry itself, criticism in both ways has been the biggest problem. I mean, not being directly or having a hand involved in it up until now, meaning, after June 21st, when I became elected. Prior to that, but I did follow it. Close relations with people directly at the table and discussing it, even being asked at time my opinion, or being asked, to assist and get involved in it, which I did from afar, but didn't really get into it in depth. But watched it all along, and watched the dynamics about the parties and the people and the things that were happening and weren't happening. It made it clear that it wasn't C10, it wasn't, outside sources, it was the inside here. And it's not a criticism, it's a reality. The looking at it and saying, you ask the question, what's the biggest issue? It's the personalities, and it's just that mistrust that, council's going to try to take over, and the industry's trying to impose itself in such a way that nobody can control them. So there's been a cross-section of the criticism, but there's also been a cross-section of, I believe, sincerity in making this work this time, because you have to make it work. If not, forget about it.
Is there a difference between you saying in the recent article with the Gazette about licensing and regulation? Because isn't the law going through the CDMP process at this point, and that could be quite lengthy? So
yeah, well, that's the point that I made earlier on. I want to light a fire under everybody, and even the process CDMP that's been put in place, maybe it doesn't belong in the CDMP process. Maybe it's got to be done, and there is provision in the CDMP process, the makeup of it, as I understand, that allows for a bypass to go around it in an emergency situation. And I consider this an emergency situation, or at least something that is really imminent, that needs to happen as quickly as possible and now. Mm-hmm. Mind you, that's my opinion. We'll probably get a different opinion from the council and the people who actually are the coordinators of the CDMP process, and some community members too. Mm-hmm. But there's situations like that where we have to move quickly. I think the council itself and the community itself cannot find us in a situation where, if we have to move quickly, not just in tobacco but elsewhere, then some instances we can't usually go to the normal process. We have to do something extraordinary.
Joe, can you tell me, what are your thoughts on Bill C-10?
It's legal for Canada and Canadians, it's illegal for us. That's the reversal of their thinking. It's illegal for them to try and impose that on us, for all the things that we've discussed previous to this. And it's a reflection of, because for me, the tobacco industry is one thing, that leads to the other products in this country that traditionally and originally belonged to us that somebody else has taken. Somebody else has used it for the medical industry, and there's a huge field out there of medical products that formerly our people used. You want to talk about natural medicines and others that now are into that and have taken it, and licensed it and used it for themselves, making it illegal for us to practice our own methods, then that's what it also leads to. It puts those issues back on the table and says, these are our products. They belong to us. And you have no right to tell us that we can't use it. It's not just in medicine, it's in natural resources, it's timber, it's water, it's minerals, it's all those things that are out there. Maybe we weren't miners way back in time, of course, except for the Kahnawake, which is the flint, which we used. Mm-hmm. But we didn't drill for oil, we didn't drill for gas, and controversial, but that was all part of our territory. And now that the government has recognized, now that the courts have recognized that we have Aboriginal title to the land, so all of that belongs to us. It didn't belong to somebody else. I don't give a damn how many laws the provinces have passed, how many laws the federal government have passed, taking control of that. Now this enters us into a field that says we're taking all that back. All you've done is illegal. All of that is illegal. Mm-hmm.
What type of reaction have you been getting, if any, from the outside governments? I know that we've really taken a beating, so to speak, in the last couple of maybe even months or even the last year, when you look at the way that Minister Valcourt or even some of the conservative government have been reacting to Kahnawake, saying things that, that they don't have any real experience to speak to. So I'm just curious, since you've been in office, what has been the reaction?
Well, I have not really had the opportunity to test that so far. Most of what I've been doing is like getting updated and oriented on all the various things that have been happening. And in between, there's been opportunities, to get out there and talk about, with the press about the tobacco industry, the law in Kahnawake, and to talk about, the scenery file, the lawsuit, the boycott against Chattagee.
There's a lot going on.
And all that kind of stuff, being able to throw that out there, really hammer away. But actually talking to government, it hasn't happened. And I don't see much of that happening either because of the elections that have come up, And it's not a question of, I want to get that Valcourt back or something. No, I consider him a very ignorant person on top of that, okay? First and foremost. So I don't want to say too much, and I'll leave it at that point. But the reactions will come very quickly when the time is appropriate to be able to work on that. One of the issues I know I want to make very, very clear, and it goes back to what I described a while ago, Kahnawake Reserve number 14, or traditional Kahnawake, traditional Mohawk territory. That has not been presented to Canada. We need to do that, and we need to make it clear. We were allies of the British Crown at one point in time, prior to Canada becoming Canada. And as recently as 1982, Constitution of Canada, Canada became a whole country with its own constitution and all of that. In that 82 is the responsibility to recognition of us as allies, not subjects of the Crown, but allies. And if you're an ally, then you have a very different kind of relationship. That's what has to be put on the table with Canada. And Canada, like it or not, has to start dealing with that. And you don't veer from that. You stay on that course. And you continue just to push and push and push and push. As much as they push, you push back. You do not give up. That's basically the only way I can describe what the future is for us in Canada. It's the same thing with Quebec. Quebec has come out, the Premier of Quebec said, well, we're going to deal with you on a nation-to-nation basis. Okay, nation-to-nation, then we're allies. We're not subjects of Quebec. Your laws don't apply. And we have to find a way of because we do have to, I'll call it cohabitate, the same territories, if you will, and we do have to share the resources. We do have to have a kind of relationship for health services, educational, policing, justice and all. There has to be some sort of working mechanism. But it's not going to be a one-way street. We're not going to adapt all of your laws and principle to have them apply in Kahnawake. We're going to have Kahnawake style types of arrangements with you. And that needs to take place. So the style of relationship and approach, and that's what it's really about. It's a relationship between us. That style is going to change drastically in the next little while. You really have to push for it. We may go through a period in which there's going to be a lot of locking of horns, and all of that, but we'll get through it. I just know we will. There's no way they can stop us.
Right. It's interesting that you just mentioned. I'm going to wrap things up, we touched on a lot, not just the tobacco trade, but that was our focus. But you're stepping back into office as the Grand Chief in what seems to be a very tumultuous time. You mentioned the lawsuit, the membership issues that we're dealing with, the recent, the tobacco trade, the land, the Highway 30 land, and now this boycott that you proposed to the community to, not shop mostly in Chattagee. But what type of reaction have you been receiving in terms of some of the suggestions that you've made in the community in dealing with this type of politics?
It's a mix, but it has to start by example. So personally, I'm boycotting Chattagee. So it has to start with that.
Has she responded, Mayor Natalie Simone?
And I really don't expect anything, The purpose, I guess, if we want to touch on the boycott, is not necessarily to destroy relations and business and all of that. but it's to say to those business people, to that community, get on her case. She's the one that's causing this problem. Yeah, you can point the finger at all the other members of the Montérégie, but it's her. So that's where the focus of attention is on. Get after her. You voted her in. You put her in place. So do something about it. That's what it's about.
Okay, and before we end off, we're going to ask you, is there just anything else you'd like to touch on, or anything else that you'd like to add before we close the interview?
Well, I guess just the extent of all the issues that we touched on, and to take, for community members who watch this program, to get information, take it as a personal way and means of looking at our relationship in our existence with Canada and Quebec and the rest of the world, really, because that's what it's about. We can't be so isolated that it's only Kahnawake, and just around us like this. It is completely, the world, because that's what our doorstep is. We are international people, is what we are. We don't just, stay around we go all over, even if it's for vacation or whatever. And we see all kinds of things that are happening out there. And the reason I say that too is because we didn't touch on a very important subject, which is the economy of the community, economic development. And in my experiences prior to leaving office in 2004 and afterwards for 11 years, almost 11 years, I had the opportunity to travel extensively and to talk to and make acquaintance with all kinds of people all over the place. And I've sparked their interest. I've sold Kahnawake, even though, I wasn't a leader at the time. I continued to be an ambassador of Kahnawake.
Right.
I've asked people to come and visit, and they've come to visit. They've come here, they've seen what I was talking about, and they like it, and they want to do business here somehow, some way. So we have to extend that and look at it. There's a regular funding mechanism from the Government of Canada, appropriated funds it's called. But then there's another side to us too, which is revenue. The revenue we derive, through public enterprise as well as private enterprise, because that's the main base of the community, private enterprise. People in the community who want to get into business, and that means you want to get into business, you have to know what you're dealing with, you have to have an education. That's important. And that's what it's all about. You have to support the educational system, build it up, make it strong, give it the components that it needs in order for our people to be able to go out and compete and be even better than what's out there.
You remained in public life pretty much, even though you had left office and you became a private citizen, so to speak, because you were no longer the Grand Chief. I don't know if it's possible, mind you, for someone like yourself to come from being in the Grand Chief's position for 20-something years, then go into the business community like you did. But I mean, at one point you were, listed in Maclean's magazine as a very influential person here in Canada in the business community. Does it surprise you that people had criticized you about that in terms of you moving through the business community, not just here, but on a global perspective?
I'm not alone I'm not alone in that. I mean, there are many others, Native leaders who left the public domain as chiefs and whatever else and got into the private sector. And you do get criticized, It comes with, it's part and parcel, and probably criticized here in my own backyard. I expect
Well, we're the hardest, right, on each other.
Yeah, we are. I mean, no matter what you do, people are, but that comes with the territory, and I don't mind that, As long as people are willing to sit down with you and, talk to you about it, instead of just criticizing from afar.
Right.
Come to you, sit with you, and ask you the questions, which many people have done.
I was going to ask you, have people actually asked you face to face and were, wanted to get the facts and not just rumors?
And when they finally get it clear and they say, oh, okay, I mean, it's not a wide known fact, but I won't say I was a fan, but I did meet with Donald Trump, on several occasions. We sat down about the possibility of having a floating casino off Long Island Sound, or something in upstate New York, or something here in Kahnawake. He was quite interested in doing that. Now he's running for the President of the United States. Yeah. So those are the kinds of people that you run into and you meet, Nelson Mandela. He was here in Montreal. I had the honor of meeting him and Winnie Mandela in a little church off Atwater Street in Montreal, rather than meeting officially with the mayor of the city of Montreal. Went and talked to him, gave him a letter, gave him a notice what Kahnawake is about, and got a response later on. And so, that is where this sort of public-private position takes you.
Right. Looking back on your political career, being off, going out into that business, private sector, coming back into politics again as Grand Chief, do you feel refreshed? Are you looking at things from a different perspective? Are you bringing things, new again to the office, or a combination of things?
It's not new, but it's got an elevated profile. It's still the same things that I talked about before, but coming from the public sector as the Grand Chief, going into private sector, then coming back again into this position, it brings you a whole new perspective about how to raise the bar, what to do, and how to do it, and to be confident about it, and to believe in it. Because if you don't believe in it, you're not going to sell anybody. If you're not confident in it, you're not going to be able to sit in front of a camera, as you and I are doing right now, and express your true feeling and the way you look at it from a very enthusiastic point of view. So that's what this does that has done for me. So I'm very confident. I'm not arrogant. I'm very confident about where we can go and how we can do it. If we can't do it during the lifetime that we have right now, then for sure we're going to set the building blocks, the stepping stones for what we always call the future generations, for them to be able to do the things. We can't leave issues the way they were left to us. Can't leave it for the future. We've got to clear them up now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching to In Kahnawake and Beyond, of course. And I'm Regan Jacobs, your journalist for today. And you are tuning in to Kahnawake's Mohawk Television Network. Thanks for watching. Onigiwahi.